Marketing is hard. But I'll tell you a little secret. It doesn't have to be. Let me point something out. You're listening to a podcast right now, and it's great. You love the host. You seek it out and download it. You listen to it while driving, working out, cooking, even going to the bathroom. Podcasts are a pretty close companion. And this is a podcast ad. Did I get your attention? You can reach great listeners like yourself with podcast advertising from Libsyn Ads. Choose from hundreds of top podcasts offering host endorsements, or run a pre-produced ad like this one across thousands of shows to reach your target audience in their favorite podcasts with Libsyn Ads. Go to libsynads.com, that's Libsyn, ads.com today.
Welcome to Adaptation, the book-to-movie podcast. I'm Nate, and my co-host Chris is actually busy preparing for his wedding in a few days, so I'm here with a mini solo episode. But first, please join me in congratulating Chris and Blair. This episode will drop after the wedding, I think. Chris will attest to the fact that I have a really hard time reading our production calendar, so congrats to you either in advance or shortly after your wedding, Chris and Blair. But I still wanted to put something out this time around, so I thought it might be kind of fun to give you guys sort of a peek behind the curtain and tell you how we choose what stories to talk about and how we plan and what we're planning to talk about in the future. But first, as usual, I want to share what movies I've seen recently, which basically has just been one movie. It is wedding season. It is graduation season. I've been all over the place. The one movie I've had time to catch in theaters is Marvel's Thunderbolts. And I think maybe they're calling it something different now, but the name is very spoilery, and that seems like a marketing disaster to me. So I'm going to stick with Thunderbolts because those monkeys are not my monkeys, and thank God Marvel is not my circus. But I did think that the movie Thunderbolts was really not bad. I had some issues maybe with some of the stylistic choices and thought that some of the characters were kind of quite poorly written, but overall it was a really interesting, character-driven adventure story with actual stakes and a pretty positive message that I think a lot of people could maybe benefit from hearing, which is pretty much all that we can ask for from a conglomerate like Disney. So give it a watch if you're feeling so inclined. Other industry news has pretty much been dominated by a really bizarre announcement from Donald Trump that he intends to put a 100% tariff on films produced outside of the U.S., which, of course, in true Trump fashion, his team has immediately started walking back on that because it would cause immense damage to the global economy and one of America's honest-to-God strong exporting industries. I don't know that anything is really going to happen there. I think a lot of people are in kind of a wait-and-see pattern. But if anything comes of that, it certainly will not be in the form that Trump posted about on Truth Social on a random Sunday night. But I guess, the idea is that you never really know, so we'll see. Anyway, like I said, I wanted to give you guys a peek behind the curtain. If you haven't listened to our little intro episode at the top of the page, that might be a really good place to start, but it sort of explains that I worked for several years as an entertainment journalist and have a deep love for movies and the industry that creates them. And Chris has a similar love for books and now teaches English. So we've become sort of armchair experts in these stories, and we really love to look at the larger impacts that they have on people and cultures, really, around the world. That's often the first step for us in choosing a text to examine and to talk to you all about. Finding something that really has something to say and has moved people and has affected change. But we're also very cognizant of the fact that women and people of color, disabled people, queer people, all of these groups that Chris and I don't belong to are often not afforded the opportunities that white men like us are. So we're very intentional in sort of prioritizing stories written by women and people of color throughout this entire project that is Adaptation. Obviously, that's not all that we talk about. We'd be leaving out some really instrumental stories if we just ignored everything written by white men. But we really feel that as a sort of two white guys podcast, it's more responsible for us to have conversations about these stories featuring people who check different boxes than Chris and I do. So we have this huge spreadsheet of books that have been turned into movies, and we sit down and we plan a few months worth of content at a time, choosing texts based on what's happening around the time of an episode drop, stories that coincide with film releases or cultural moments, that kind of thing. The second half of the year has been a bit harder to plan just because movie studios are really jockeying release dates for their awards-worthy movies, so we haven't planned much of the second half of the year, actually. But I wanted to give you some insight on what you can expect us to cover in some capacity, as long as there isn't too much overlap between movie release dates. July is when that sort of intentional planning will start, with us covering Jurassic Park to coincide with the release of the new movie called Jurassic World Rebirth, and then we'll cover Animal Farm. There's a new adaptation of that classic novel directed by Andy Serkis coming out in July, supposedly. That one seems like it might get pushed to me, but I don't know for sure yet, so we'll just have to wait and see. This summer, we also want to cover Vineland by Thomas Pynchon, which is loosely being adapted to film by Paul Thomas Anderson for the movie One Battle After Another. Hank Thompson's Caught Stealing will hit theaters this summer, so we plan to cover that. That one stars Austin Butler. This fall, we also have Kiss of the Spider-Woman, which is based on a book originally written by Manuel Puig. The Running Man, written by Stephen King, and we actually have something really special planned for that episode too, because there are several Stephen King adaptations in theaters this year. Of course, Gregory Maguire's Wicked will be covered to coincide with the release of Wicked for Good later this fall. And Frida McFadden's The Housemaid is on the schedule too. A few other book-to-film adaptations are on our radar as well. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is, of course, being adapted by Guillermo del Toro, so that'll probably be great. Kazuo Ishiguro has Clara and the Sun coming out at some point this year. That's a favorite author of Chris's, so we're looking forward to that one. Maggie O'Farrell's Hamnet, Ariana Harwitz's Die My Love, Warren Zane's Deliver Me From Nowhere, Lawrence Osborne's Ballad of a Small Player. There's a handful, but I don't think you guys probably want to listen to me just read from my spreadsheet here. Oh, and Highest to Lowest is based on a book called King's Ransom by Ed McBain and Evan Hunter. That's a Spike Lee movie coming out later this year, so that'll probably be really good. But that's it, and that's kind of how the sausage is made. Otherwise, we just pull from this massive spreadsheet of books turned into movies, and we just consume our stories separately. Chris reads the book, I watch the movie, and we come together to teach one another in front of the internet. We love suggestions. You can share those with us on social media. We're on Twitter at AdaptPod and on Instagram at adaptation_pod. You can find the links to those profiles as well as our